Hi guys, Yong here and welcome to another video. This video we're going to talk about Fibonacci ratios. This is one of the most common topics that many traders are actually using or even asking, for me to share a little bit more with you. So here I am, okay. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to break this into a 4-part series, okay, because I believe that if I condense everything into one video, it's going to be a little bit too long and you'll probably lose your attention by the back part and part of it. So I've decided to break it into 4 parts, okay? And these 4 parts here are very important that you watch them in sequence, because what I'm going to share is a build-up all the way towards the final episode where we put everything together, how you apply all these Fibonacci's into your trading strategy. Okay. Now, to give you a big picture, Fibonacci over here, when we talk about the ratios, there are generally 3 methods of how traders are using. Okay, the first one is of course retracement, the second is extension, and the third one here is expansion. Okay, so we're gonna break them down into the various episodes, and then we're gonna dive into it to share with you more in details of that. Okay, but before we talk about that, if today you are still not subscribed to the channel, now is a very good time for you to do that. And make sure when you're subscribed, click onto the notification button as well, so that when we release the subsequent episodes, you'll be the first one to be notified. Okay, so in today's first episode, today's first episode of this series, before we even dive into Fibonacci ratios itself, it's very important for you to fully understand under what situation you'll be using it. Okay, and for that we'll go back into the basics of what a trend is based on technical analysis. Okay, now, and I want you to understand that in any chart, any instrument, any financial asset that you're looking at, the price doesn't move in a single direction all the time. Okay, it goes up and then it comes back down a little bit, it continues to go higher, and that's where we start to see a trend. Okay, now to give you some illustration so that you can better understand what I meant. So let's just take this as your starting point. Okay, so let's fall back a little bit to the basics of what is a trend. Okay, how do you objectify or objectively define an uptrend and subsequently a downtrend? Okay, now let's say this is the starting point of the price. Okay, that means previously maybe it starts to come down and then it stops there and it starts to bounce. Okay, now when you look at the chart and all you have in terms of data and information is this, okay, that means you only saw previously was coming down and it starts to bounce back up. Okay, this itself is not yet an uptrend. Okay, an uptrend is not being established. Okay, because what is an uptrend? By the definition, an uptrend is where you have the higher high and a higher low. Okay, so now right now if you take a look at this, there is a low, which is over here where we started. There is a temporary high, which is at this point, but you do not have a higher low, you do not have a higher high. So in this case right now, this is not technically an uptrend yet. Okay, yes, price is perhaps moving up, but it's not an uptrend. Okay, so what happens next is, let's say if price from here it starts to come back down and it pauses there. Okay, so now what happens now is you do have a low point, and you are more or less certain that this point here is a high point. Okay, now at this very moment, you do not have an uptrend still. Why? You do not have a higher low, you do not have a higher high. Okay, now what happens if, let's say, price continues to develop and it starts to go back up? Okay, now in this case, you realize that this high here has been broken, so you do have a higher high here, and this low here didn't break the previous low. Okay, so technically right now what you have over here is you do have a higher low and you do have a higher high. Okay, now when this happens, when this is being observed in a chart, this is what we call an uptrend. Okay, now if I give you some numbering sequence, right, you realize that for you to say that this chart is in an uptrend, this asset is in an uptrend, you do need a minimum of 4 points. Okay, you need a low, you need a high, you need a higher low, and you need a higher high. Okay, so for you to establish if this is an uptrend or not, you need to have minimum 4 points. A low, a high, a higher low, and a higher high. Now what happens if from here, okay, price starts to come back down? Okay, so what happens is this becomes, the end point, right? As of now, this is the highest point. Okay, and you start to observe that, oh, price is coming down. Okay, and at this particular instant, you can't define and say that, oh, it's reversing, it's in a downtrend. No, you can't, because subsequently for a downtrend to be defined, you need again 4 points. Right now, you do not have any. Okay, now what happens if price continue to develop like that? Okay, so this is the previous high. Huh? Okay, now you realize that at this instant, you still do not have a downtrend. Why? Because you might have this starting point, you have a new low here, but you do not have a lower low, you do not have a lower high. So technically at this point in time, you can't say that the market is in the downtrend. Now, if today you take a reference, okay, so you change your reference point and you change your reference to this point here from a starting, then from point 3 onwards, you do not have a higher high, higher low as well, which means that you do not have an uptrend. Okay, yes, if you have starting here, it's an uptrend, but if today you're starting from here, ignore what has happened, this is not an uptrend. Again, for an uptrend to be defined, you need 4 points. For a downtrend to be defined, you need 4 points. Okay, so I hope this part here helps to objectify a little bit of what is an uptrend, what is a downtrend, when do you can define it's an uptrend, when you can define as there's no clear trend. Okay, this is important because if you want to apply Fibonacci, okay, whether it's a retracement, extension, or expansion, you need to be very clear where to pull it, and before you be able to do that, you need to be very clear as to where is the trend. Okay, is it up, is it down, or is it there no clear trend? Now, if this continues down, okay, now at this instance, you do have a downtrend. Okay, why? Okay, now take a look at this. Now, if I change this a bit, this becomes your starting point from that new high. Okay, then this is your point 1, this is your point 2, this is your point 3, and you have your point 4. Okay, and of course, price broke this. Okay, so you do have here your starting point. You have a new low. You have a lower high. Okay, and you have a lower low. Okay, so you do have 4 points, and that objectively you can define it as a downtrend. Okay, now this gets a little bit more confusing for some of you who start to ask questions like, Yong, what if I start here and price is right now here? So in this overall chart, are we in an uptrend or are we in a downtrend? Okay, if you're asking that kind of questions, very good. Okay, so how do we define it? Of course, again, in terms of the scale, the data that you're looking at a chart. If today you're starting from here all the way on the left and the price market is right now here, you want to look out for is where is your previous low. Okay, so in this case here, you do have this higher low, right? Now if I draw a horizontal line and extend it, if price has not broken this low yet, you still have a low, you still have a higher low, you have a high here, you have a higher high. So if today you're taking reference from this starting point all the way until here, technically this uptrend is still intact because you do have this 4 point here and the market hasn't broken your previous high, previous low, okay? But if today you're taking the context of from here onwards, then you have a downtrend, okay? So again, if you're looking at a chart, depending on the scale, depending on the data you're analyzing, some traders might look at more data and they say that this is an uptrend. Some traders look at smaller piece of data, they might say that it's a downtrend. Okay, so again, every time as a trader, if you're defining a trend, whether it's going up, going down, you need to also be specific in the duration, the data, the scale that you're looking at. Okay, so I hope this method of how we define an uptrend or a downtrend becomes very clear. Okay, now to extend this a little bit, okay, now let's say this continued coming down and it broke off this previous low. Okay, it broke this low. So what happens is this is no longer an uptrend. Why? Because now you do not have a higher low being established. Okay, I hope you realize that, right? So what will happen is if I change the color a bit, Okay, if this is still your starting point, this becomes your 1. This entire move up here is where your new high here is. This is 2. Okay, this entire move that's coming down, this is only your 3rd point. Okay, which is potentially here can be a higher low, right, if this starts to reverse. But what you do realize is based on this, okay, if you take a look at a much bigger perspective, you only have 1, 2, 3. No trend. You can't really define whether it's an up or it's a down. But you realize that within it, internally, you do have a mini uptrend, you do have a mini downtrend. Okay, so I hope that's clear. Okay, and this method in objectifying an uptrend and a downtrend is very important, because when we move on to the next part where I share with you a little bit more about Fibonacci ratios and more specifically on retracement, okay, where to use the tools, where to pull your Fibonacci retracement, you need to be very clear in identifying and defining where is the trend. Is it going up, going down, or you do not have a clear one. Okay, so that becomes very important. I hope that's clear. Okay, so my suggestion to you guys for now is that, you know, take what you have learned in this video, open up a chart, doesn't matter what time frame it is, and put into practice what I just mentioned. Okay, start putting in that high, low, lower low, lower high. Okay, putting in the count of 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, practice this method of defining what is an uptrend, what is a downtrend, and I assure you that you just need to put in a little bit of practice. You realize that, hey, identifying a trend now becomes so easy, and there's no more second guessing. Okay, because again, these are all very, very systematic processes, step-by-step process. Okay, do practice on this, because when we come back in the second episode where I share with you about Fibonacci retracement, I do expect you to be very well equipped with this understanding. Okay, and then from there, we'll move on to how to use Fibonacci retracement. That will actually continue to build up your trading arsenal, your toolkits, your strategies into analyzing the technical chart. Okay, so again, if you have any questions with regards to this, feel free to drop it in the comments below. If you're not subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that so that when I release the next episode, you'll be the first one to be notified. Okay, and I would strongly encourage you to also drop and share what you have actually learned, benefited from this video, okay, so that we'll be able to, you know, work with the algorithm and ideally to reach out to more people, so that I'll be able to, you know, share with them my knowledge, my experience, and ideally help them in their own trading journey as well. Okay, so with that, hope this is clear. Okay, if not, then I'll see you in the next episode where we talk about Fibonacci retracement.